your life is on the line and you know that you're on an oxygen tank and they're going to put two in your head, see what you do. Because the bottom line is that me, I'm one person. I can never miss.
Guy's not being loyal to you. How could you be loyal to him?
Yeah.
And whether you're your father or not. So, but it's always been hard because it was my father.
The word came down, this guy had to go. We didn't know nothing about him until the last minute. And I liked him. I liked Bill. He was a nice guy, but...
Welcome to the show. Welcome to this episode of Chattin with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Larry Rolla. What's up, Larry?
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm all right.
So last week we talked about a lot of stuff, and today we're going to talk about your association with Nicky Barnes.
Okay. Last week I left a lot of stuff out. You gotta remember that it's so difficult. See, like right now we're talking about Nicky Barnes. Nicky Barnes was a part of my life in the middle of complete turmoil, and it's very hard for your audience to understand how important it was for me, and how, in fact, at that time, Nicky Barnes actually saved my life. Because there's very, very little backstory, but I'll just say this, maybe 30 seconds, and then I'll get right into Nicky Barnes. I had a terrible, terrible gambling habit starting in 1971, and I was in the racehorse business. I was making a lot of money with the racehorses. I was fixing some races and doing what I have to do because to support my gambling habit, which was horrendous. I mean, during the football season, I was betting 20,000 a game, 40,000 a game, 20,000 with two different guys, and betting 10, 11 games every weekend. And so, and naturally, statistically, out of the 15, 16 games of football, the players only win 3 or 4. So you really have no shot. But, the chase is what gets you. You just keep chasing and chasing and chasing, and you think you can beat it. You're always looking to get even. And even though I was making a lot of money, and I had it, I was making the money fixing races because that gambling habit, which I won't get into, it caused me to lose over $1 million, and then I took a shot at the guys, and then I wind up owing $800,000. They made it a Shylock loan, $16,000 a week in Vig, and I had a guy that I hooked up with, Tony Shula, who I met at Lincoln Downs, and I devised a plan through Con Erico, who was a jockey who knew all the top jockeys. And see, like I said, if I start getting into this, we'll be here till December. But I devised a plan where we would offer the top jockeys at Aqueduct and Belmont a lot of money. In other words, if you had the morning line favorite as a jockey at Aqueduct or Belmont, we'd give you $5,000 just to finish horse and third. And so if you had 3 or 4 horses and they were all morning line favorites, you get $15,000, and you'd be surprised that it worked. We made millions. The problem was my partner, Tony Shula. I set him all up. I set him up, and I set everything up. It was perfect. All he had to do was call me at noon every day. Well, in the beginning, the phone calls came on a regular basis. Then the following week, they came every other day. Then the third week, they came every third or fourth day. And then there was times where he just would disappear. Now, I had my own stable of horses. I was doing my own thing. I couldn't go chasing this guy. But he was putting me in a bad spot because I was using that money to pay the VIG loans and everything else I had to do. So when he stopped calling, which was 2 or 3 times, one time I had Frank Collada go after him with a couple of his guys, and then he behaved himself. And he behaved himself for about 3 or 4 months because they stayed with him, and then we made a lot of money again. And then he, Tony Schuler, Frank Collada's guys went back, and he started the same nonsense again. So now, after about a week or 2 weeks of him not calling, I started to get myself jammed up again, and everything was starting to cave in. And I really didn't know how to go about it because Kabert, the one guy, the Jewish guy, Barney Cutler, who I owed the money to, he wasn't that bad. He was an old Jewish guy, retired from the Meyer Lansky mob. But Kabert was a complete raving lunatic. He killed 17, 18 guys. He just was a bad guy. And he was Gotti's button guy in New Jersey. And he didn't want to hear any excuses. He didn't want to know anything. And so things were getting serious where I was in serious jeopardy of not making my VIG payment that week. And all of a sudden I got a call one day. Well, a friend of mine called me. He says, "You coming to the Concord tonight?" And I said, yes. He was the maitre d' at in the showroom at the bar, in the bar. And I got there and he says, "Listen, there's a couple of neighborhood friends of mine that are here and they can't get rooms. They can't get seats at the Raleigh. They're here to see Natalie Cole's first ever opening, show. First time she was ever on the road. I think it was 1974, 75. That was her first time ever. And her opening thing was at the Raleigh Hotel. Well, Nicky Barnes and Robbie and Leon, they all, and Jazz, and they all came up there, and 4 big black guys, and there were no rooms. Well, that's what they said. They had no rooms. There was no room in the showroom. There was no rooms, no place in Monticello for them. So my friend said, "They're good friends of mine, see what you could do." And the reason he asked me was because at the time I had racehorses with the owners of them hotels, Manny Halbert, who owned the Raleigh Hotel, Bobby Parker, who owned the Concord Hotel. So I had a lot of big connections up there for that sort of stuff. So I says, "Bring them over." They were outside in the lobby. They came to my table. I had a table for 6 all the time, right at the bandstand, every night at the Concord. And he brought them to the table. We were introduced, and it was Nicky Barnes and Robbie and Leon and I think it was Jazz. And they told me of the problem, and I said that, I'll solve it, and I did. They got rooms. They got the best seats in the house to watch Natalie Cole, and they came to the racetrack that night. I told them I had a horse, and through conversation, they found out I was a trainer, driver. So they came to the racetrack that night. We had dinner, but I had a horse in the last race. So halfway through the night after dinner, I told him, I says, "Look, I have to leave. I have a horse in the last race." And he says, "Well, what do you think?" And I says, "Look, I set up the race, but you can't bet. You can't bet because there's no handle here. And I already set it up. I did, I take care of my guys. We each get 1 or 2 tickets in the trifecta, a superfecta, whatever it was back then. I think it was superfecta. And, we wind up making 2, 3, 4,000 each, and that's good. But if you guys start betting, you're going to wreck it, and it's going to look suspicious. We're going to have investigations and everything else. So don't bet."
Because they're with you, right? Because they're with you? Is that why you're telling them that? Because these guys are sitting with you at the time?
Oh, yeah. They're right at the table. We had dinner that night at the racetrack. Then I had a horse in the last race, so I had to leave. Right after dinner, I went into the paddock, and they asked me, "Can that horse win?" And I says, "Look, you can't bet." And then I told them the reason why, because there's a small handle here, and I already bet for me and the other drivers, and you would screw everything up, and they'd be an investigation. So anyway, he said, "Okay." He says, but I want to see you after the race. I have something that might interest you. So I says, I'll meet you at the Concord. So that's what happened. I met him at the Concord. And at the Concord, he tells me, he says, listen, I can get down 5,000 a position, meaning 5,000 to win, 5,000 a place, 5,000 a show on any horse that you come up with. And I said, Nicky, I says, look, I don't mean to insult you, but ain't a bookmaker in the world going to take any bet. First of all, any bet on a trotting race, much less 5,000 a position, and give you track odds. He says, Larry, he says, me and my crew, we bet over $1 million, sometimes close to $2 million a week on sports. He says, and they will give me whatever I want. So I said, all right. I says, when you get back home, make sure. And he called me up and he says, yep, I got a courtesy bet for 5,000 position. Call me with a horse. We'll go partners. You'll get 2,500. I'll get 2,500. So that's what I did. But that situation was a little different than just fixing a race. Fixing a race, and I'll say it in layman terms so anybody can understand it. Let's say there are 8 horses in a race, and I pay 4 of the drivers to stay out of it, to say worse than third. So I'd say we're boxing the trifecta. Box means you take 4, the remaining 4 that I didn't pay to stay out of it, and take them numbers and just box them. So no matter what combination comes in, you win. So what I'm going to do now, that's completely eliminating the gamble from gambling, eliminating 4 horses from the field, and boxing the other 4.
How do you make the horses slow down to be in third or something? Like, how do you make the horses not run as fast?
Well, let's say me and you, we had both I had my dog on a leash and you had your dog on a leash, and I says, I'll bet you $1,000 that I can beat you or whatever, and then I would tell my friend to bet 10,000 that you beat me, and all I have to do to win my bet is for me not try to beat you, and just as we're running, hold my dog back and let you just get away. Now, and that's a simplified version of it, but
has there ever been times where the horse takes off and you're like,
well, there's times when you run over the money, where it's impossible, because sometimes you put yourself in a position, or you find yourself in a position where you're sitting third because of how the race went, and you're going down the stretch and you can't really lean straight back or fall off, so you run over the money, but you make it up the next time. These are things that happen sometimes. I had to find a different plan, because now I couldn't pay 8 guys, 7 guys in an 8-horse race not to win. So I had to figure out a scheme how to just get winners. So what I did was, I had a stable of maybe 30 horses at the time. And when you bring a horse into the paddock to race, they have an equipment guy, a tattoo guy. He comes and checks the tattoo and checks it to make sure that that's the horse that you're racing. So to give you an example, and I'll use claiming races, even though it was never a claim, it was a condition race, but that gets to be complicated. You wouldn't understand it. So let's say it's a $3,000 claiming race, and I have a horse in there. That's the morning line favorite. And so what I do is I would take a real good horse, say a $20,000 claimer that looks similar to the $3,000 claimer, and I would bring him in the paddock in place of the cheaper horse. And then I would give the equipment guy $500 or $1,000 to just pass me by, just say, yeah, just check off, yeah, everything is fine. And then I was racing, even though it was condition races, it wasn't claimers, but we use claimers as an example. I'd be racing a $20,000 horse against $3,000 horses where he couldn't lose. So that's what I did. And then to make the price bigger, I would send a couple of friends of mine who the whole racetrack and the grandstand knew they were my friends. I'd give them a couple of $100 and they would be betting on another horse in a race. So word would get out in the whole grandstand, oh, Larry Rolla's betting on the 5 horse, when in reality, I already bet on my horse.
Yeah. So
vice
everyone's
versa.
running there to go place
Right.
these bets.
So the odds on my horse that I was betting would go up, and the horse that I wasn't betting, but the whole racetrack thought I was betting, would go down. And the guy who Nicky Barnes was betting with was Fat Tony, the bookmaker and the boss of the Genovese family back in the 70s. And he would take any kind of action. But like I said, they were betting $1 million, $2 million a week on sports. And this was a courtesy bet. So even if Fat Tony, even if we wind up winning, let's just say 100,000 for the week, they would be betting $1.5 million. So Tony would be paying me 100,000, but probably making 7, 8, 900,000 profit, even though. So he gave them the courtesy bet to keep them betting with him as a courtesy because they were big players. So that's how it went. And we made a tremendous amount of money. He basically saved my life because at that time, Tony Schuler wasn't calling me with the fixed races. And he basically saved my life for that period of time because we made a tremendous amount of money. And I was able to catch up. I was able to get even up to that point. And then one day I got a phone call that his whole crew got arrested. Now at that time, I was driving down to the garage. He had a garage, I think it was on 145th Street, Lenox Avenue. I think, I could be wrong. All I know is out where the garage is now, there's Al Sharpton's building. His office is there. So the garage is not there any longer. But I think it was on 145th Street, Lenox. I used to go down there every Tuesday and pick up my money. And it was anywhere between 60, 70,000, whatever, 80,000. And so when I heard he got arrested, I got in my car and I drove to the garage and I pulled that in. It was a driveway going down. And I stopped the car. I got out and there were 3 black guys in his office. And I walked in and I said, hello. I says, I know what happened. I said, I'm Larry Rolla and there should be an envelope in the drawer for me. And the guy says, the one guy sitting behind the desk, there's nothing here for you. And I says, no, just look, I'm sure there's an envelope for me. And he says, he opened the drawer and he just took out a gun. He put it on the table. I said, there's nothing here for you. And if
How much were you going to pick up? And
probably,
was this an everyday occurrence? Were you going there all the time?
Once a week I would go down there. I'd go down there once a week. And probably 70, 80,000, maybe 100. I think the most I ever picked up was 101. But they said you need to leave now. And I did. I later found out, in fact, it's on one of my podcasts, there's only two living members of that whole posse that he had with him, and one was Leon.
The council.
The council. Right? One was Leon. And I was lucky enough to get him on my my podcast, and he kind of explained the whole thing. And what happened was, when they got pinched, he had my money. He was the one that he had my money, and when they pinched him, they took all the money and everything else. He wound up going to jail for, I think he got 10 to life, but he got out in 10 or 12 years. And I was lucky enough to find him. And when I started the podcast, and I had him on the show, I forget what podcast. I think it was podcast 6 or 7, but he was on the show explaining that whole thing, because there's a lot of people out there in the world of gamblers that deal with bookmakers and Sherlocks. They would never believe that you can get down with any bookmaker a bet on the trotters. But the story I just told you is 100% true, and thank God Leon was still around to verify it.
Yeah.
And if that didn't happen, I don't know what would have happened, because I would have had to go to Cabert, who I owed. I had to come up with 16,000 a week. Half of it was to him, half of it was to Barney Cutler. And Barney would have understood, but Cabert was different. When this first happened, and I come back from Florida owing him, I owed 700,000 or 800,000. I owed half. I think I owed 370, 380 to Cabert. The rest to Barney. He realized I took a shot at him, and I didn't have the money to pay. So when that happened, I had a decision to make. I was in Florida, and I either had to run away, kill myself, or come back and just face the music. But facing the music with Cabert is not really facing the music. It's just like walking into quicksand. You're dead.
Slaughter. Yeah, you're
It's
just like,
automatic.
yeah.
But I never ran away from nothing in my life, so I went back. And sure enough, I met him in the little cafe, his little club he had there, and didn't say a word. It was in Atlantic Highlands. Didn't say a word. He just got up. He was with three of his guys in the corner, and just got up, walked out to Atlantic Highlands, the dock area there where they have all these boats. And the two guys, one had me by the arm, and we followed Cabert out. And he got in some kind of boat, maybe 30, 40-foot boat, and they walked me downstairs. And after about a half hour, they brought me back up, and they had a little, like a half a 55-gallon drum about 3 feet high. They told me to stand in it, and they put a bag of cement in there, or 2 bags, and pumped some water in there. And then Cabert showed up, and he says, Sammy let you go too far, meaning his guy that I was betting with. He said he let you go too far, and that's on him. You went too far, and that's on you. Now, you tell me why I shouldn't let this cement harden and throw you the fuck overboard. And I says, well, I could pay. I says, you got over $1 million of my money already. It's not, I took a shot, but I could pay. And he says, you could pay? All right, I'm going to make this money you owe me a Shalak loan. 2 points every week. You come and you see Sammy every week, and you give him, I think it was 7,200. You give him 7,200 every week. The first week you miss, you'll be right back here, and that'll be the last time you come here. So the reason I told you that is so you could understand what kind of guy I was dealing with if I did miss a payment. That's why when Nicky Barnes showed up, I did him a favor, but he basically saved my life.